Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. And today we'll be discussing the theory related to the chapter Breathing and Exchange of Gases. Okay, in this session, we'll be discussing the NCERT section 14.1 and 14.2. Okay, this is the part 1 of the lecture. Before starting the lecture, I just want to give you one information that the images, text, and other materials used in the presentations are for education purposes only. We respect the intellectual property rights of the original creators and owners. If you are the owner and have any concerns or issues, please contact us at sathee@itk.ac.in and we shall remove the content immediately. Please note that the parts of the content may have been generated using generative AI, which is experimental. Okay, so what are the objectives of today's session? So we will discuss the main reproductive organs in various organisms. Okay, so we'll talk about the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and the lungs. So these are the main respiratory organs in the respiratory system. We'll also talk about the structure and function of the alveoli. So alveoli is a region, or they are the sacs where exchange of gases takes place. Then we will understand the mechanism of breathing. Okay, within this we'll be talking about inhalation and exhalation. Okay, or you can say inspiration and expiration. Okay, taking in of air and releasing the air. Okay, we'll also talk about the role of diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. Okay, so both of the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles, both of them have role in exhalation and inhalation, or you can say in breathing. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the main respiratory organs. Okay, within this we'll be talking about human respiratory system. We'll also talk about the mechanism of breathing, which is NCERT section 14.2. Within this we'll be talking about respiratory volume and capacities. Okay, then we will summarize this entire lecture. We'll discuss some NCERT-based questions which are related to these topics. And in the end, there'll be some keynotes that will help you memorize these concepts and these topics. And there'll be some interesting questions for you in the end that will enhance your critical thinking ability. Okay, so let's begin with this lecture now. So first, I will give you a brief introduction of this chapter. Okay, so let's understand what is breathing. Okay, what is breathing? What is respiration? What is mechanism of breathing? What are the organs involved in breathing? Okay, so what is the basis of human respiratory system? Okay, let's talk about the basis of human respiratory system. So first of all, there is exchange of gases. Okay, what do you mean by exchange of gases? So this can also be called as breathing. So breathing is a mechanism that allows for the continuous exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the body and the environment. Okay, so there is exchange of gases. Which gases? Oxygen and carbon dioxide. And these gases are being continuously exchanged. And the exchange is happening between body and the environment. So what do humans do or animals do? They inhale oxygen and they exhale carbon dioxide. Okay, so continuous exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide is occurring between body and the environment. Now, how this is happening, we will understand this. So you can say here in this image, here there is a person. Okay, this child is inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. This is breathing. The exchange of gases is known as breathing. Okay, oxygen is represented by blue and carbon dioxide is represented by red color. So the oxygen is inhaled through mouth or through nostrils, then it reaches finally to the lungs. Okay, and then what happens? In the alveoli, exchange of gases occurs. Finally, the oxygen is transported by the RBCs, which consist of hemoglobin. Okay, oxygen finally reach the tissues, and this oxygen is used for carrying out various metabolic activities, such as respiration. Okay, in respiration, what happens? The respiratory substrate, such as glucose, fats, or lipids, these are broken down in the presence of oxygen to release energy. And in this process, carbon dioxide is also released. Okay, and this carbon dioxide, you can see, is then again exhaled out through the mouth or through the nose. Okay, clear. So oxygen which is inhaled, this is used for carrying out metabolic activities due to this, such as respiration. By respiration, carbon dioxide is produced and energy is also produced in the form of ATP. So you can see here, cell consists of mitochondria. In mitochondria, respiration occurs. Mitochondria is also known as the powerhouse of the cell. It generates ATP in the energy in the form of ATP. And you can see this person is eating, and this food have a lot of biomolecules. It have glucose, okay, which is a carbohydrate. Then it has fats, it has proteins. Okay, these are all respiratory substrates. These substrates are broken down in the presence of oxygen, and carbon dioxide with energy is produced. This energy is used for carrying out various other processes. Okay, so there is a difference between breathing and respiration. In breathing, no energy is being produced, only exchange of gases is occurring. In respiration, energy is produced in the form of ATP. So you should know the difference between breathing and respiration, although these words are used interchangeably, but there is a difference between these two terms. Okay, glucose is you can say, it is the most simple respiratory substrate. Glucose is usually used for generating energy by the process of respiration. If glucose is not available, then proteins, or you can say fats, can be used. Okay, we talked about the cellular respiration. What happens in cellular respiration? First of all, what is cellular respiration? This respiration which is occurring within the cell, this is known as cellular respiration. And here oxygen is used by the cells to break down simple molecules like glucose, and energy is released in the form of ATP. Along with energy, carbon dioxide is also released. Okay, so the process releases carbon dioxide also, which is a waste product, and this needs to be eliminated out of the body. Okay, so you can see again, carbon dioxide is being produced by cellular respiration, and this carbon dioxide, this is exhaled out during expiration or during exhalation. Okay, let's talk about some of the respiratory organs which are present in the other animals. We were talking about the humans. Let's talk about respiratory organ in the animal kingdom. Which all respiratory organs are present in various animals? Okay, so here you can see in this table, animal group is given to you, and the respiratory organ which is present in these animal groups are also listed here. So first of all, in lower invertebrates such as sponges, how respiration occurs, how exchange of gases occurs. So in lower invertebrates, the exchange of gases occurs through entire body surface through simple diffusion. Okay, so exchange of gases can occur through simple diffusion also. For diffusion, what is required? A concentration gradient is required. An entire body surface is involved in exchange of gases. In earthworms, the exchange of gases occurs through moist cuticle. Then in insects, a tracheal system is present. So there is a network of tracheal tubes in insects. Okay, So insects which belongs to arthropoda. Okay, in insects, tracheal system is present. So what is special about the tracheal system? Okay, so tracheal system in insect is a network of air-filled tubes that facilitate the gas exchange. They consist of the spiracles, which are the external openings through which the oxygen will enter. So oxygen enters through the openings known as spiracles, and then from the spiracles, the oxygen, it travels through the trachea and the tracheoles, and finally it diffuses into the tissues. So you can see in this image, in some animals, external gills are present, such as in the larva of the amphibians and larva of the fishes, external gills are present. Okay, in aquatic animals, gills are present. Okay, then lungs are present in terrestrial animals, and insects, they have the tracheal system. So you can see in tracheal systems is a network of tracheal tubes. These tracheal tubes are nothing but air filled tubes. Okay, they are the network of air filled tubes. Okay, now in aquatic arthropod and mollusk, gills are present, and when the exchange of gases occurs through gills, it is known as brachial respiration. Then in terrestrial vertebrates, terrestrial means the organisms which live on land, for example mammals. Okay, human is a mammal. Here the respiratory organ is lungs, and when the exchange of gases occurs through lungs, it is known as pulmonary respiration. So you should remember all of these scientific terms. Okay, clear? So here is an exception. Okay, amphibians like frogs can respire through their moist skin as well as the lungs. Clear? So this is an exception here. Here you can see the exchange of gases is occurring by two ways. One is by moist skin, another is through lungs. So what does this mean? Okay, or why this is happening? So this is happening because these amphibians, they can live on both land and water. So this is a kind of adaptation. Okay, so whenever they are in the water, they can respire through skin, and when they are on the land, they can respire through lungs. Okay, respiration or exchange of gases, when it occurs through skin, it is known as cutaneous respiration, and when the exchange of gases occurs through lungs, it is known as pulmonary respiration. So you should remember this: cutaneous respiration and the pulmonary respiration. Okay, so in respiration, as I have told you, respiratory substrates are broken down. Clear? Some of the respiratory substrates are like glucose. This is the simplest. You can say respiratory substrate. Some other respiratory substrate can be glycogen. So yes, glycogen can be used in cellular respiration. Okay, so reserve food material in animals is glycogen. Clear? Okay, so basically what is glycogen? It is a stored form of glucose, and the glycogen can be broken down to form glucose whenever the body requires. So according to the body needs, the glycogen breaks down into glucose, and this glucose can be used as a respiratory substrate. So glycogen, not directly it can be used as a respiratory substrate, but glycogen is first converted into glucose, and then it can be used as a respiratory substrate. Okay, this is clear? All right. Now let's talk about the human respiratory system. Okay, now what is the air passage? What is the direction of air passage, and what all organs are involved? So see, airs enter through external nostrils. Okay, then it reaches the nasal chamber. Okay, then it will reach pharynx, then trachea, then bronchi, bronchioles, and then finally oxygen will reach the alveoli. So this is the air passage. This is how the air is traveling from outside to inside. Okay, from outside environment to the alveoli, which is present within the lungs. So you should remember this air passage. Okay. So what is pharynx here? Pharynx is the common passage for both food and air. Okay, clear? So air is inhaled through external nostrils or through mouth. Okay, this air reaches the nasal chamber, you can say, and from the nasal chamber it reaches the pharynx. So pharynx, you can see, is the common passage for both food and the air as well. Then from the pharynx it will go to larynx, which is known as the sound box, then to trachea. Then trachea further divides into bronchi, and bronchi further divides into bronchioles, and these bronchioles terminate into sacs, which are known as alveoli. And in alveoli, exchange of gases occurs because alveoli are surrounded by very thin blood capillaries. Okay, so alveoli is the site where the exchange of gases occurs, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs. So oxygen, which is present in the alveoli, this oxygen will enter into the blood, and the carbon dioxide, which is present in the blood, and this carbon dioxide is produced because of metabolic activity. This carbon dioxide enters into the alveoli. Okay, then from the pharynx the air enters into the larynx. Larynx is known as the sound box. It is a cartilaginous box that aids in sound production. Okay, so here you can see in this image, air enters through external nostrils, then it reaches the nasal chamber, then the pharynx, then larynx. Here you can see this is the larynx here. Then from the larynx the air will enter into the trachea. Okay, then from the trachea further divides into bronchi and the bronchioles. Clear? So here you can see, and finally the bronchioles will terminate into alveoli. Now there is a layer surrounding the lungs known as the pleural membrane. Clear? So this is the entire lung here. Okay. Clear? The membrane surrounding the lung is known as the pleural membrane. This is the pleural fluid which is present between this membrane. So there are double, you can say pleural membrane is double layered. So between them a pleural fluid is present. Okay, clear? So this is a trachea, you can see here. Trachea is further dividing into bronchi and then into bronchioles. Clear? So there is a left bronchiole and right you can say bronchi as well. And then bronchi further divided into bronchioles. Now let's talk about epiglottis and trachea. So in the image you can see epiglottis and trachea also. Epiglottis is a thin cartilaginous flap that prevents food from entering the windpipe during the swallowing. Okay, so this epiglottis prevents the food from entering into the trachea during swallowing. So this is the role of epiglottis. Okay, trachea is a straight tube extending up to mid-thoracic cavity. Okay, till where this trachea extends? Till mid-thoracic cavity. So here you can see this is epiglottis. This is a cartilaginous flap actually. Okay. Next, okay. Now the trachea further branches into bronchi and the bronchioles. So trachea splits into right and left primary bronchi. So trachea, okay. Now this trachea divides into right bronchi and left bronchi. Okay, within the lungs. Now this bronchi is present within the lungs. Okay, so trachea splits into right and left primary bronchi at fifth thoracic vertebra level. So you should remember this. Where it divides? At the fifth thoracic vertebra level. And primary bronchi branch repeatedly into smaller airways known as secondary bronchi. Then secondary bronchi further divides into tertiary bronchi. Then tertiary bronchi divides into bronchioles. And then terminal bronchioles. Or simply you can write this bronchi divides into bronchioles. Okay, so here you can see this is the image showing you the human respiratory system. Here you can see this is the larynx known as a sound box. Then you have the trachea. Okay, trachea is surrounded by this cartilaginous ring, so that trachea doesn't collapse when air is absent. Okay, that's why their cartilaginous rings are present within the trachea to prevent the collapse of the trachea when no air is present. Then this trachea further divides into right and left bronchi. You can see right main bronchus, left main bronchus. Then this, you can say bronchi or bronchus is divided into secondary bronchi. So these are secondary bronchi. Secondary bronchi into tertiary bronchi. Okay, this is tertiary or segmented bronchi. Clear? And then this tertiary bronchi is further divides into bronchioles. Clear? Okay. Now this bronchioles, okay, at the terminal position of this bronchioles, a sac-like structure is present known as alveoli. Okay. So let's talk about alveoli in the external structure of the lungs. So C-shaped cartilage ring, it support and prevent collapse of the airways from trachea down to the initial bronchiole. So the trachea is provided with cartilaginous ring which prevent the collapse of the trachea when no air is present. Now each terminal bronchiole, okay, so bronchi divides into primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and then into bronchioles, and then into terminal bronchioles. Now, each terminal bronchioles give rise to a number of very thin, irregular walled and vascularized bag-like structures known as alveoli. So alveoli you can call bag-like structures or sac-like structures. These are highly vascularized, means alveoli is surrounded by numerous thin-walled blood capillaries. Actually, blood capillaries are very thin and that permits the exchange of the gases because they have a very thin wall. Okay, so this alveoli, they are highly vascularized. Okay, so this image we have already discussed. Now, let's talk about the lungs. So lungs, they are covered by a double layer membrane called the pleura. It's known as the pleural membrane. And there is a pleural fluid present between these two membranes. And what is the function of this pleural fluid? This reduces the friction between the two membranes. Okay. Now, you can see this entire air passage. This is divided into two parts. First is the conducting part. Second is the exchange part. Okay. So what is special about the conducting part? The conducting part transports, filters, and humidifies and warms the air. Okay. Conducting part is from the nostril to the terminal bronchioles. Okay, this is the conducting part from nostrils. Okay, external nostril to the terminal bronchiole. This is the conducting part. This is involved in transport of the oxygen. Okay, it filters the oxygen as well from the dust and the microorganism. It humidifies the air as well. Okay, and it warms the air as well. So that's why this is known as the conducting part. Next, there is the exchange part. So the site of actual gas diffusion, this is known as the exchange part. So the exchange part consists of the alveoli and their duct. So in alveoli, the exchange of gases occurs. That's why alveoli is known as the, or it comes under the exchange part. Here the exchange of gases occurs. Clear? So again, this is the image showing you human respiratory system. So respiration involves following steps. Now let's understand what are the steps involved in the respiration. So breathing, also known as the pulmonary ventilation. Okay. So what happens during breathing? Atmospheric air is drawn in, okay, and carbon dioxide rich alveolar layer is released out. So this is talking about inspiration and expiration. Okay, what happens during inspiration? Okay, or inhalation, the atmospheric air is drawn into the lungs, and the carbon dioxide which is present in the alveoli now, this is released out. This process is known as exhalation. Now diffusion of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, occurs through the alveolar membrane. Okay, so here a question can come, how the exchange of gases occurs. Exchange of gases occurs through simple diffusion across the alveolar membrane. Okay, clear? So this alveoli is surrounded by very thin walled blood capillaries. Clear? So this oxygen, this passes through this alveolar membrane, enters into the blood capillaries, and the carbon dioxide, it enters from the blood into the alveoli. Clear? So respiration involved inspiration and expiration. So there are two processes. In inspiration, you inhale the atmospheric air into the lungs, and in expiration, the carbon dioxide in the alveoli, this is released out of the body. Clear? So respiration, we were discussing about the steps involved in respiration. Clear? Here, after the diffusion of the gases, they are transported by the blood. Both carbon dioxide and oxygen, they are transported by the blood. Clear? And then what happens? There is a diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and the tissues. So what is happening here? During inhalation, what happens? The oxygen, it will reach the alveoli. From the alveoli, it will diffuse into the blood. Then the oxygen is being carried by the blood. Okay. By blood, we mean RBCs, because RBCs have hemoglobin. Okay. Some of the oxygen can also be carried in the dissolved form formed in the blood as well. Some is transferred in a bind form with the hemoglobin. Okay. So we can say the gases, the oxygen is transported by the blood. Then what happens? From the blood, the oxygen diffuses into the tissues. Okay. Now in the tissues, the respiration will occur, the metabolic activities occur, and carbon dioxide will be generated. Okay. Now there is a utilization of oxygen by the cells for catabolic reactions, and this will result in the release of carbon dioxide. So catabolic reactions, what are catabolic reaction? So in catabolic reaction, the larger size molecule, they are broken down into simple molecules. Okay, sometimes you call respiration also as a catabolic process. And in these metabolic reactions, carbon dioxide is produced as a byproduct. Clear? So again, you can see in this image showing you inspiration and expiration. Clear? Now breathing consists of two main stages. We have discussed inspiration, also known as elation, and expiration, known as the exhalation. Now, let's talk about the mechanism of breathing. Okay, how do inspiration and expiration occurs? Now, air moves due to a pressure gradient between the lungs and the atmosphere. So, how the movement of air is occurring here? How are you inhaling the air? Clear? So, this you can say movement of the air is due to development of a pressure gradient. And this pressure gradient is developed between the lungs and the atmosphere. Okay, the pressure which is developed within the lungs is known as intrapulmonary pressure. Okay, clear? So we will discuss this image as well. Now let's talk about the inspiration. So inspiration is an active process. It requires energy. Now what happens during inspiration? The diaphragm will contract and it will flatten. Now the external intercostal muscles contract, lifting the ribs and the sternum. So these are all the processes which are occurring during the inspiration. First of all, the diaphragm will contract and external intercostal muscles. So what are intercostal muscles? So intercostal muscles, they are present between the ribs. Okay, clear? So one of the type of intercostal muscle is external intercostal muscle. They are internal intercostal muscles also, but here external intercostal muscles play a role here. These muscles contract, and due to the contraction of the external intercostal muscles, there is the lifting of the ribs as well as the sternum. Now what happens due to this? So this increases the volume of the thoracic cavity, or you can say this increases the volume of the chest cavity. Okay. So you can see this is the mechanism of breathing showing you inspiration. So here the diaphragm is contracting. Okay. Then you can see rib and sternum, they are raised, they are lifted because the external intercostal muscle contract. Because of this, the volume of the chest cavity or the volume of the thoracic cavity increases. Okay, if the volume of thoracic cavity increases, then what will happen to the intrapulmonary pressure? Okay, the intrapulmonary pressure means the pressure inside the lungs. This becomes lower than the atmospheric pressure. And due to this, the air enters into the lungs. So you can see a pressure gradient is formed here. Clear? So air, the pressure inside the lung is less as compared to the atmospheric pressure. That's why the air will enter into the lungs. So air rushes into the lungs because of this. So again, you can see diaphragm contracts, ribs and sternum, they are lifted. Because of this, the volume of thoracic chamber increases. And as the volume of thoracic chamber increases, the intrapulmonary pressure decreases. Okay, it becomes lower as compared to atmospheric pressure and the air will enter into the lungs. This is how inspiration occurs. Let's talk about the expiration. This is a passive process. Okay. Now here what happens, earlier the diaphragm were contracting. Now here the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscle will relax. Earlier they were contracting. So in inspiration, both of them contract. In expiration, they are relaxing. So due to this, the volume of the thoracic cavity will decrease. The intrapulmonary pressure means the pressure inside the lungs will rise above the atmospheric pressure. So now the intrapulmonary pressure is more than the atmospheric pressure. So again, a pressure gradient is created and the air will move out of the lungs into the atmosphere. So due to this, air is expelled from the lungs. Okay, so in this image, this is showing you mechanism of breathing. Okay, mechanism of expiration. Here the diaphragm is relaxed and the ribs and the sternum return to their original position because the external intercostal muscles also relax. Volume of the thoracic chamber decreases, and due to this, the pressure inside the lungs, the intrapulmonary pressure, increases as compared to the atmospheric pressure, and the air is expelled out from the lungs. Clear? Now, we can do forced expiration also. So, this involves the contraction of intercostal muscles and the abdominal muscles. Clear? So, this happens during forced expiration. Here, intercostal muscles are involved. Earlier, we were talking about external intercostal muscles. Now, we are talking about the internal intercostal muscle. This helps. Okay, this is involved in forced expiration. Okay, you are inhaling the air. You can say voluntary. You are forcing more air to be expelled out. Clear? Now, what is the respiratory rate? Okay, how can you define the respiratory rate? So, healthy adult breathes about 12 to 16 times per minute. Okay, rate is always per minute. Now, what is a spirometer? So, spirometer is a device. It is an instrument used to estimate the volume of the air involved in the breathing. And if there is some variations in the spirometer, then you can tell the person might be having some respiration related issue, some respiratory related issue. Okay, so this we have already discussed. This is the mechanism of breathing that is being shown to you. Okay, let's discuss about the respiratory volume and the capacities. So, okay, this is again very important. A lot of questions come from this topic. Now, what is tidal volume? So, tidal volume is the volume of air moved during the normal breathing. Okay, which is approximately 500 ml. So, you should remember, you can say these digits also. Okay, clear? You should remember the volume also. How much is tidal volume? What is the tidal volume? Clear? The next is inspiratory reserve volume. This is the additional air that can be forcefully inhaled after a normal inspiration. This is approximately 2500 to 3000 ml. Yeah, so you can see this is showing you this figure is showing you respiratory volume and the capacities. So here you can see, okay, on one axis lung volume is shown to you. So here you can see, okay, inspiratory reserve volume, which is around 2500 ml. Clear? Then expiratory reserve volume is shown to you. We'll talk about expiratory reserve volume also. Then residual volume is also shown here. Okay, clear? Then we'll also talk about all of these terms here. Okay, inspiratory capacity, vital capacity, total lung capacity. Okay, so let's talk about expiratory reserve volume. So this is additional air that can be forcefully exhaled after a normal expiration. This is approximately 1000 to 1100 ml. Respiratory, what is residual volume? The air remaining in the lungs after a forceful expiration. This is 1100 to 1200 ml. So even if you are forcefully expiring the air, okay, even after forceful expiration, still the air remains in the lungs. This is known as residual volume. Okay, now next one is inspiratory capacity. This is the total air inhaled after a normal expiration. This is tidal volume per inspiratory reserve volume. You should remember this formula. Then expiratory capacity, this is total air exhaled after a normal inspiration. This is tidal volume plus ERV. Then you have functional residual capacity. This is the air remaining in the lungs after a normal expiration. Okay. So this is different from the residual capacity because this is air remaining in the lungs after a normal expiration. So there is a difference. Residual volume was the volume remaining in the lungs after a forceful expiration. Okay, formula for functional residual capacity is ERV plus RV, expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume. Again, in this image, you can see the different types of respiratory capacities and respiratory volume are shown to you. Okay. Next is vital capacity. This is the maximum volume of air that can be exhaled after a forceful inhalation, or the maximum volume of air a person can breathe out after a forced inspiration. So you should remember this formula again, ERV plus TV plus IRV. Clear? So this is the maximum volume of air that can be exhaled after a forceful inhalation, or the maximum volume of air a person can breathe out, means exhale, after a forced inspiration. A total lung capacity is the total volume of air in the lungs after a maximum inhalation. This is vital capacity plus residual volume. Clear? Now let's summarize this entire lecture now. Clear? So respiratory system consists of the organ facilitating gaseous exchange. Now what is the air passage? Clear? So air enters the body through mouth or through the external nostrils. It reaches the nasal chamber, then to pharynx. From pharynx, it reaches the larynx. From larynx, the air will enter into trachea, then into bronchi, and then finally into the bronchioles, and then the exchange of gases occurs in the alveoli. So till bronchioles, this is the conducting part, and the alveoli forms the exchange part. So lungs contain alveoli, which are the air sacs. Here the exchange of gases occurs. Primary function is to supply oxygen and remove carbon dioxide. So in alveoli, the exchange of gases occurs. Breathing occurs through two phases: inhalation, where the diaphragm contracts, okay, as well as the intercostal muscle, external intercostal muscle. And during exhalation, the diaphragm will relax. So you should remember this. When will the diaphragm contract and relax, and then what will happen? Now, you should remember about the tidal volume, which is air inhaled or exhaled during normal breathing. Inspiratory reserve volume, which is additional air that can be inhaled. Expiratory reserve volume, which is extra air that can be exhaled. Then residual volume, which is air remaining in the lungs after forced expiration. You should remember all of these. Okay, these were the major ones. Then let's discuss some questions related to these topics. First is question, differentiate between breathing and cellular respiration. This is very important. Now, what is the difference between breathing and cellular respiration? So let's have a look at the answer. So this is quite straightforward question here. So you can see breathing, this is the physical process. Here only the exchange of gases is occurring. It is a physical process of inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. But cellular respiration, this is a biochemical process in which the respiratory substrates are broken down to produce carbon dioxide and energy in the form of ATP. Now, breathing means exchange of gases occurs in the respiratory organs such as lungs and gills, and respiration, cellular respiration occurs within the cells, primarily in the mitochondria which are present within the cells. Okay, so simply you can say in respiration energy is produced by breakdown of the glucose. In breathing, no energy is being produced. So breathing is a physical process, respiration is a biochemical process. Okay, this image is showing you, you can say the breathing as well as the cellular respiration. Now you can see breathing is a physical or mechanical process. Cellular respiration is a biochemical or metabolic process. Now in breathing, exchange of gases occur between organism and environment, and in cellular respiration, there is a production of energy for cellular activities. Now you can see in breathing, no products are formed. The only exchange of gases occurs. And in cellular respiration, ATP is produced, which is a source of energy. Then carbon dioxide is produced as a byproduct, and water is also produced. In breathing, there is no energy produced, and in cellular respiration, energy is produced in the form of ATP. Okay, breathing is a continuous and a rhythmic process. But cellular respiration, this is also continuous process as long as the nutrients are available. So for respiration, respiratory substrates are required. Okay, for breathing, no respiratory substrates are required. So that's why it is a continuous and a rhythmic process. Respiration is also continuous, but it is continuous as long as the nutrients, as long as the respiratory substrates are available. Now breathing, it occurs in the respiratory organs. Okay, clear? Cellular respiration, it utilizes glucose, okay, oxygen, enzymes, and the mitochondria. For breathing, respiratory organs and muscles are also required. Okay, for cellular respiration, glucose, which is the respiratory substrate, this is required. Oxygen is required. So in the presence of oxygen, glucose is broken down. Then enzymes are required for carrying out this metabolic reaction. And then mitochondria. Within mitochondria, cellular, this respiration occurs. Okay, mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of cell. It generates ATP through respiration. Okay, breathing, this is controlled by respiratory center in the brain stem. So these are some additional differences between breathing and respiration. Okay, so breathing is controlled by respiratory center present in the brain stem, and cellular respiration, this is controlled by cellular enzymes. Means enzymes present within the cell. Okay. Now, in breathing, or exchange of gases can occur in air as well as water. Clear? And for cellular respiration, what do you require? Which medium do you require? You require intracellular fluid, means the fluid present within the cell. Okay, this fluid consists of all the enzymes required for respiration. The next question, what is the role of diaphragm in breathing mechanism? Okay, they're asking about the role of diaphragm. So what will be the answer here? So diaphragm plays a crucial role in the breathing mechanism. What is this role? During inhalation, what happens? The diaphragm, which is a dome-shaped muscle below the lungs, this will contract and this will flatten. So this increases the volume of the thoracic cavity. Okay, or this chest cavity. And because the volume increases, the intrapulmonary pressure will decrease and the air will enter. Okay. But reverse is happening during the exhalation. Clear? So what is happening in inhalation? Let's talk about inhalation again. So as the volume of the thoracic cavity increases, now a negative pressure develops in the lungs. Negative pressure means this pressure is lower as compared to the atmospheric pressure. So intrapulmonary pressure is less as compared to the atmospheric pressure. So the air will enter into the lungs. Okay, through nose or the mouth. Clear? So this movement is due to the development of a pressure gradient. Due to this, the lung will expand and they will fill with air. Then during exhalation, what happens? The diaphragm relaxes and returns to its dome shaped. Now due to this, the volume of the thoracic cavity decreases. Now the intrapulmonary pressure will increase. Means a positive pressure is created within the lungs. Okay, or in other words, you can say the pressure within the lungs increases as compared to the atmospheric pressure, and this leads to exhalation of the air. So air is pushed out of the lungs, okay, as the pressure inside the lungs increases as compared to the atmospheric pressure. Okay, so let's discuss some key points related to these topics. Now, lungs, they contain about 300 million alveoli. So you can see how many alveoli are present. 300 million alveoli are present. So these are tiny sac-like structures, and they are highly vascularized. Okay, the oxygen, it finally reaches the alveoli, and from the alveoli, the oxygen will enter into the blood. Then the oxygen will be carried by the blood, and it will be finally the oxygen will be diffused from blood to the tissues. And from the tissues, due to metabolic activities in tissues, carbon dioxide is produced, and carbon dioxide again carried by the blood, and this carbon dioxide is finally diffuses into the alveoli, and it is exhaled out, out of the body. These alveoli, they increase the surface area for gaseous exchange. Okay, that's why alveoli are present. Okay, this is a site of exchange of gases, and they increase the surface area for gas exchange as well. Now, we breathe approximately 20,000 times daily. Now, right lung is larger with 3 lobes, and left lung has only 2 lobes. Total lung capacity is about 6 liters. Now, breathing rate increases during exercise due to higher oxygen demand. Okay, so respiration rate or breathing rate, this will increase during exercise because you require more oxygen. More oxygen is required to generate more energy. So whenever you're doing exercise, you need more energy. Your muscles require more energy. So for producing this energy, you need more oxygen, because oxygen is used for the breakdown of the respiratory substrates such as glucose, and the energy is produced in this process. Clear? Now, diaphragm is the main breathing muscle. So due to contraction and relaxation of the diaphragm, inhalation and exhalation occurs. Along with it, external intercostal muscles are also involved. Okay, now nose can detect about 1 trillion scents. So our nose, okay, one of the role of nose is in the inhalation and exhalation of the air. Okay, external, you can say the air, atmospheric air enters through the nose also and through the mouth also, and the air is, you can say, expelled out also through the nose and the mouth. A nose can also detect 1 trillion scents as well. So it has receptors. Now, what is the breathing rate of adult? You can say animal or human, it is 12 to 20 breaths per minute. This is adult breathing rate. Okay, this is per minute. 12 to 20 breaths per minute. Okay, lungs are the only organs that float in water. So they can float in water because they have air in them. They are very light as well. Now, whenever you expire the air, this contain carbon dioxide. This air contains about 4 to 5% carbon dioxide. So expired air contains 4 to 5% carbon dioxide. Okay. Or whenever you are inhaling the atmospheric air, it is not that you are inhaling oxygen, you are inhaling other gases also. So in atmosphere, a lot of gases are present. Clear? But we say we inhale oxygen. But actually, along with oxygen, we are inhaling other gases also. Now, there are some interesting questions for you that will enhance your critical thinking ability. So think about these questions. So question number 1 is, why can't humans breathe underwater despite oxygen being present in water? So you can see oxygen is present in the water as well. So still, why humans cannot breathe underwater? Okay, but amphibians and fishes, they can breathe underwater. Clear? So here you have to talk about the different respiratory organs. Humans have lungs, fishes, they have gills. Okay. Now, question 2, what causes hiccups and how are they related to the diaphragms? So you get hiccups. So what is the reason of those hiccups and how it is related to the diaphragm? So sometimes the diaphragm gets irritated, then you get these hiccups. So think about this also. Next question, why do mountain climbers need oxygen tanks while birds can fly at high altitudes? So what is the reason for that? Okay. So as you move up, the oxygen, you can say, level decreases or the pressure decreases, you can say. Now, question 4, how does yawning impact respiratory volume? So these are very interesting questions. You should think about all of these questions. Next question, why do we get out of breath during the exercise? So whenever you're doing physical exercise, okay, your breathing rate increases and you get out of breath. Okay, you start taking deep breaths then. So why this is happening? So these are some interesting questions for you. Okay, so with this, we end this session. I hope this session was quite knowledgeable for you. We'll meet you in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.